Hello and welcome. My name is Amir Khalil from Dicker Data, and I'm sitting here in our lovely offices in Sydney, Australia. I'm lucky to be joined today by Amit Sharma, Senior Systems Engineer at Dell Technologies, and Keerthi Namalapudi, Hybrid Cloud Executive at Microsoft ANZ. Thank you guys very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Amit, maybe I'll start with you. So you're across infrastructure for Dell Technologies. What have you seen in the market recently?
I think, Amir, there are two things if I were to list out categorically. One is obviously any kind of a cloud is our friend, but cloud data repatriation is a real thing now. So there are a lot of customers who are coming back to data centers, maybe their own or maybe co-locations for various reasons, which we all know. It could be a cost, maybe data locality, they want to have more control. That's one thing, right? The other trend, when you talk about the infrastructure, be it a storage or a compute or a hyperconverged, the highest market or the growing market is the hyperconverged, which actually ties really well because you still want to have a data center or an infrastructure which is cloud-like, which is nothing but hyperconverged, right? And if I were to compare these two things, hyperconverged and a cloud use case, I think there's nothing better than Microsoft which comes into the picture, right? And we've got Keerthi for that. So Keerthi, what's your views on that?
So from a Microsoft perspective, right, there's a strong saying in Microsoft that hybrid cloud is the future. But I'll just add to that and say hybrid cloud is here now. We have customers in the market that are in Azure as well as running some of their workloads on-prem. And there isn't a solution out there that is so comprehensive and integrates these two platforms so seamlessly and so natively. And that's the problem we're trying to solve with Azure Stack HCI, right? There's about 80 to 85 customers in the Australian market today, in the ANZ market, that are hybrid. That means they have workloads that are either predominantly in cloud or a tiny bit in cloud, and there's workloads on-prem. And that's the market that's here today, that's present today, and these are the customers we're trying to help solve with their infrastructure issues.
Excellent. So you spoke about Azure Stack HCI, repatriation. Now I understand there's quite a few OEMs offer this product. What's unique about Dell Technologies' Azure Stack HCI offering?
I think if I start listing out the value props and what we bring to a table, I think that would be quite a long journey and quite a long discussion. But if I were to list out one key big thing, would be the ease of use. Now, as we mentioned, that customers are used to about using the ease of management and ease of usage of a public cloud, right? Now, if they are repatriating to their own data centers, they want something similar. They want to have an infrastructure which is single touch. They can be deployed easily, they can be managed automatically, or they can be updated like day 0, day 1, day 2 operations we're talking about. And that's where not only HCI as an infrastructure comes into picture, but when we talk about Dell and Microsoft together, we have a co-engineered solution. And when we talk about co-engineered one, like we have developed that solutions together. We know our strengths, so we have worked on those points. And when it comes to deployment, again, it's Dell Technologies who will do that for you. And after deployment, if there's an issue, upgrade, update, it's a single hand to shake. It's a single support center. So you get the experts from Microsoft sitting in Dell office, talking to you, making sure that your workloads are running fine 24/7, 365 days a week, like an year. It should be, I think that's the ease we are offering onto the market, let alone with the security, the other features, which we can always talk about. But I think the most unique part is the co-engineered solution, the validated solution from Microsoft, and we have one piece to go for.
Yeah, I think the co-engineered solution is definitely a great selling point for Dell Technologies. Keerthi, maybe I'll go to you for the next question. What makes Azure Stack HCI good value for customers? I understand there's some changes recently that have happened with the licensing model.
Yes. So just as a way to introduce what Stack HCI is, it's basically Microsoft's bespoke hybrid cloud solution that sits on OEM hardware, that sits on Dell hardware. It sits on a hyper-converged platform. Now, there is a couple of ways Azure Stack HCI can be licensed. One is a cloud-based licensing, which means our customers can use their Azure subscription, and then they can link that subscription into their Stack HCI cluster. And then we just do a very basic billing of $10 per core per month. And then you would multiply that 10 into the number of cores, into the number of years, and you would sort of do like a upfront TCO analysis of what Stack HCI costs. With this model, the Windows virtual machines need to be licensed separately. So that means a customer will need to obtain a Windows Server Standard or a data center license to license the underlying virtual machines.
Amit, do you have anything to add to that?
I think just piggybacking on what Keerthi said, that okay, we are trying to bundle a lot of things together, right? But at the same time, as you mentioned, the SMB as a sweet spot for the market, there'll be a lot of customers who may procure an hardware which might have, let's say, an X number of cores, and they're still not using them and still don't want to pay for that, right? For whatever use case they are starting. They want to invest into this technology, but they don't want to pay for the license. And that's where the Dell Unique next again come into the picture. So we have a way using the OME and the rest of the integration with the Azure Stack, where we can actually limit the number of cores our customers will be using in that particular hardware. So imagine you have got 12 cores, but you want to start with 6 as of now because you don't want to buy other hardware in 6 months' time. So you only pay for 6 cores as of now because that's the licensing model you have. And the cherry on the top is, it's not even, you don't have to do any reboots or restart. It's completely automated. It's completely seamless. Just a click of a button and you can limit your number of cores. And if you wish to expand the number of cores, the click and goes onto a bigger number of cores within the same hardware. And that's the flexibility. Again, I just want to go back onto the cloud consumption model. That's where customers were going to the cloud, right? Because they want to have that ease of scalability. We have something similar right on your data center on Azure Stack.
Yeah, that's excellent. So it gives you that cloud model
Exactly.
with an Azure Stack HCI solution, and you can scale as you need it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So when I say $10 per core, I should caveat that by saying $10 per active core. So to Amit's point, if the core is disabled in the BIOS, then the customer is not paying for it.
Wow. Keerthi, my next question is around security. So obviously it's a very big concern for a lot of our customers. How does Azure Stack HCI address some of those security concerns?
That is a great question. So there's many layers of security in Azure Stack HCI, right? Our OEMs practice something called secure supply chain, which means the hardware is secure from factory and while in transit. But once the system arrives at a customer location or in the data center, it is secure from the time it starts to boot up. We use a technology called secured core service, which means each time the system boots, it only boots with Azure Stack HCI as the OS. So we have a system in place that verifies the firmware signature of the operating system, so the hardware will not boot if there is an interruption in the boot sequence. So that's just security at a very basic layer, right? Of course, our Dell employs something called TPM 2.0, but we also use BitLocker, which does data at rest encryption, and we use SMB, which encrypts data while it's in transit. And this is just on-prem security, right? As soon as the data goes into cloud, our customers are able to use Azure Defender, and they are able to extend that security posture from their Azure cloud into their on-prem cluster, which means they can apply role-based access controls, Azure policies, what have you. They can manage that Stack HCI cluster exactly the way they would secure their Azure resources within their Azure resource group.
That's excellent. Amit, does Dell Technologies have anything to add onto the security layer?
See, the easiest way to break in is using your firmware, right? So now we are talking about an HCI as a platform where you have compute, storage, networking all sitting together and trying to work in harmony, right? And then on top you have Microsoft Azure layer on top of, right? The biggest concern, I come from a support background as well, right? So the biggest concern is that how do you make sure that version A of X works with version B of Y? Azure, Dell, hardware, software, everything, right? That's where another Dell Unique part of the Azure Stack is. We have something called LCM, the life cycle management. So in the factory, when I said it's a co-engineered solution, we make sure that the Azure's version is compatible with Dell hardware and the networking and X, Y, and Z, all the components which customer has nothing to do with. They don't have to worry about it. They don't have to think about, okay, is that version compatible or a valid version? Because again, falling back on Keerthi, Microsoft releases software updates every 3 months, 6 months. So if customer were to manage those updates individually, it's a big thing, right? So we make sure those updates are validated, tested, and then only passed to the hardware. So as a customer, there's a single bundle, you click on that and everything is updated, which is a valid configuration for you. So we make sure that that is happening. Just adding on to the hybrid picture of it, now you have your hardware sitting in your data center, right? What if there is a version which is not compatible or it's an old one? How would you get to know? Because again, customer doesn't want to manage 2 separate systems, one on the cloud, one on the data center, right? So using the Arc technology, Dell pushes all the hardware configuration onto your public cloud management portal. So you don't even have to log into a data center management portal. What you're used to a public portal, which is Azure portal. You log in there and you'll be able to see all the hardware configurations pushed right there. So it's those small things, but makes a life easy for an administrator, for a security operator, much, much easier.
Thanks, Amit. Keerthi, my next question is for you. So you spoke about a lot of the benefits of Azure Stack HCI. Can you give me some real world use cases of Azure Stack HCI solving some customer challenges?
Absolutely. So I'll introduce the use cases with a very high level overview of where we're seeing our customers use Stack HCI, and then we'll go into some very specific use cases. Because we are a hyperconvert solution, and we also go from one node, a single node HCI solution, all the way up to 16 nodes in a cluster, our use cases for Azure Stack HCI is quite varied. It's meant to fit into a lot of customer requirements across a lot of our customer segments, whether they're in that SMC space, whether they're in that corporate space or that enterprise space. One of the biggest use cases is data center modernization and infrastructure consolidation, right? When we say hyperconvergence, we are going from a traditional 3-tier solution to a very dense, small rack footprint sort of a solution, which is hyperconverged solution. That's exactly what Azure Stack HCI is. So we're taking that infrastructure modernization story a step further, and we're saying, instead of just doing a hyperconverged solution, why don't you make it hybrid? Why not get a platform that is natively integrated into Azure, that goes into Azure from the ground up as soon as it boots up? And then now you've got a story that is not just infrastructure modernization, you're talking cloud modernization. You're talking about transitioning from being purely on-prem into either going into cloud or even managing both of these estates parallelly, simultaneously together. So that modernization story is very important to us. The other use case we're talking about is edge use cases. So whether that's one node sitting at a factory somewhere or at a retail store somewhere or maybe a school campus somewhere, we're talking edge use cases that starts with one node, and we're talking about data center use cases that can go as high as 16 nodes. Now, in terms of very specific use cases, containerization is a big story with Azure Stack HCI. We offer Azure Kubernetes services on Stack HCI, and this is fully consistent with AKS in the cloud. This is a great story for customers that have a containerization roadmap. So they are able to develop containers in the cloud and deploy on-prem or vice versa. They're able to move containers unmodified between these two platforms. So containers is a big use case for us, as well as SQL workloads. There's two ways our customers can run SQL on Stack HCI, and that is through either an Azure service, which is SQL managed instance, or they could run traditional SQL licenses on-prem. Now, because all of this is just end-to-end Microsoft, right? SQL is a Microsoft product, Stack HCI is a Microsoft product. We found a way to have SQL run in kernel, which offers the best IOPS and best performance in terms of just running transactional workloads on the platform.
Excellent.
I think Keerthi did cover a lot of use cases, but I have a different angle to it. Like when we talk about the SMBs, and especially in the current situation where the electricity prices are shooting up like anything. So if you're an SMB, you are really concerned about every single unit of a rack space you use, right? So if you were to move from a 3-tier solution to something like 2U of an HCI, which also consumes very less power put together compared to a 3-tier solution, it's a win-win. So not only you're getting a future-proof technology, but you're saving a lot on rack space, energy, and overall saving is too much, right? So if you are not concerned about technology, but if you are a financial person, this should definitely excite you.
Yeah, definitely, with the way energy prices are going.
Exactly.
Keerthi, my next question is for you. What are some of the ways that customers can leverage Azure hybrid services?
Yep, that's a really good question. So the whole the point of having a hybrid cloud solution is to allow our customers to bring Azure to them. So our mission with Azure Stack HCI is to bring the power of Azure to our customers on their data centers, on their servers, on infrastructure that they own. This means customers are able to actually fire up native Azure services, but on their on-prem cluster on their platform. A few examples of this are, say, Azure Backup. You're able to click a button on Windows Admin Center, and you're able to back up into the Azure cloud. You can use Azure Site Recovery, you can use Azure Log Analytics or Azure Monitor. Or if you want to talk about containerization, they can actually enable Azure Kubernetes services on Stack HCI. Now, we also use a very powerful tool called Azure Arc, and Azure Arc is what makes more of this magic happen. Using the power of Azure Arc, customers are able to Arc enable AKS. That means they can bring in more Azure services on-prem. A few examples of this is Azure SQL Managed Instance or Azure Cognitive Services or Data Services. There's a whole bunch of these in preview, like Azure Functions, Logic Apps, and so on. So the intention is, if there is a cloud service that can be made available on-prem, Microsoft will try to bring it on-prem. And these are just a few examples of the many ways that you can make your on-prem cluster into a very truly hybrid solution.
That's excellent.
I think on the procurement side, I'll add two things to it. One, obviously, when you're procuring, you would need some technical assistance, help, whatever the right word is. So I think the team at Decade Data is quite qualified to do not only just a Dell solution, but put together Dell and Microsoft solution. So they've always got the access to solution architect. So if you are a customer or a partner looking at distributor like yourself, then yeah, they can use those services. But from a consumption point of view, if you want to have a CapEx model, that's always been available. But with the introduction of Apex, if you want to consume the Azure Stack AX nodes or the whole solution, the stack of solution on month-on-month payment basis, that can also be done now. So you can have a CapEx model or an OpEx model, whichever way you want to consume, and you will still have access to the right technology. So.
Yeah, we're seeing a big explosion in the interest in consumption models,
Yes.
where Apex fits in perfectly. Thank you, Amit, for joining us today, and thank you, Keerthi, for being here with us. Thank you all for watching. If you would like any more information about Microsoft Azure Stack HCI, please reach out to your Dicker Data representative.